Most mayors cut ribbons, shake hands, kiss babies. Daniel Harlow hunted serial killers, not because it was part of the job, it wasn't. Not because he had training, he didn't, but because, in his city, the bodies never stopped turning up, and the police couldn't keep up, or wouldn't. By day, he was the smiling public figure in a tailored suit, making speeches about infrastructure and education. By night, he was something else entirely. A shadow slipping through alleyways, scanning abandoned buildings, knocking on doors the police had stopped knocking on. No one in City Hall knew, not even his deputy. Only one man did. The killer he was chasing. They called him the Sculptor, a predator who left his victims posed in grotesque, almost artistic displays. Every crime scene was a gallery, every corpse a warning. For years, the Sculptor had eluded capture. But when he made a mistake, one small, deliberate mistake, Daniel Harlow noticed. The mayor's hunt began quietly. Late-night drives to crime scenes, meetings with frightened witnesses in parking garages, following trails of evidence the police had missed or ignored. And the closer he got, the more he realized the Sculptor wasn't hiding from him. He was leading him somewhere. Until one night, Daniel arrived at a crime scene before anyone else. The body was still warm. And carved into the victim's skin was his own name. Most people expect their mayor to give speeches, attend council meetings, and negotiate budgets. They don't expect him to track a serial killer at 2 in the morning. But Daniel Harlow wasn't most mayors, and his city wasn't safe. For months, the Sculptor had been leaving a trail of death. Each victim posed like a grotesque statue, each scene more disturbing than the last. Police press conferences promised progress, but behind the cameras there was nothing but dead ends. The case wasn't just cold, it was frozen. Until the mayor stepped in. By day, Harlow smiled for cameras. He cut ribbons at new schools, shook hands with business owners, and posed for photos with tourists. But by night he studied crime scene photos in his office until his eyes burned. He memorized the killer's patterns. He walked the streets alone, long after midnight, searching for the next clue. The killer noticed, and instead of avoiding him, he seemed to welcome the chase. Clues started appearing in places only the mayor would find. Letters addressed to him, objects left on his desk, and then the bodies began to feel personal. This isn't just a story about politics or crime. It's about obsession. It's about how far someone will go when the line between duty and vengeance disappears. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the most chilling true crime stories. Like this video if this case already has you hooked. Comment below with your city and country so we know where you're watching from, and so we can see how far this mayor's hunt has reached. Now, let's step into the shadows and follow a mayor who decided to make hunting a serial killer his real job. Chapter 1. The First Body. Daniel Harlow had been mayor for just over a year when the first body surfaced. It was a cold November morning, and he was supposed to be at a breakfast fundraiser. Instead, he stood in a dim alleyway behind a shuttered diner, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood. The police chief was there, already sweating despite the chill. "You don't need to see this, Mr. Mayor," he muttered, but Harlow ignored him. The victim was a young woman, mid-20s, posed like she was dancing. Her arms were bent at strange angles, fingers curled toward the sky. A silk scarf had been wrapped around her neck, but not tightly enough to strangle. The cause of death, the coroner would later say, was blunt force trauma to the head. But it was the arrangement of her body that unsettled Harlow most. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, intentional, almost artistic. On the brick wall behind her, someone had painted a crude shape in red, not spray paint, blood. It looked like a distorted spiral. The detectives whispered about gangs, about copycats. Harlow didn't believe it. He knew the city's gangs. They didn't stage bodies like this. They didn't take time to create a scene. The chief pulled him aside. "Let us do our job. This isn't for City Hall." But Harlow's mind was already moving. The news would break in hours. The fear would spread faster than the facts. And when the next body came, because there would be a next, people wouldn't care what the police were doing. They'd blame the mayor. That night, Harlow skipped dinner with his wife. He sat in his office with the case file, flipping through photographs until his vision blurred. The way her hands were positioned, the angle of her head, the scarf. He started sketching the crime scene on a legal pad, circling details that didn't make sense. His phone buzzed twice. Texts from his chief of staff reminding him about the fundraiser. He didn't answer. 3 days later, the second body appeared. This time in an abandoned theater downtown, male, early 40s, seated in the front row as if waiting for a show. A single white rose on his lap. Same spiral painted behind him, same absence of fingerprints, footprints, or DNA. Harlow didn't believe in coincidences. This was a message. But who was it for? At the press conference, the police chief stuck to a prepared statement. No comment on any possible connections between the cases. Harlow stood beside him, silent, but inside he was boiling. This wasn't just about catching a killer. This was about trust. If the public thought their leaders were powerless, panic would set in. And panic was political death. That night, he made his decision. He called in favors from people who owed him, not politicians, but the ones who knew the city's hidden corners, former beat cops, bar owners, a retired private investigator who'd once been too stubborn to quit. They met in the back room of an old boxing gym. "The police will work the case," Harlow said, "but so will we, quietly, and we'll get there first." The group began combing through old records, looking for anything resembling the spiral symbol. Harlow himself walked the streets at night, unannounced, unguarded. It wasn't safe. His advisors would have called it reckless, but he needed to feel the city's pulse in the places where the sirens didn't reach. And in one of those nights, in a trash bin behind a pawn shop, he found something the police had missed, a folded piece of canvas with a half-finished spiral. The paint was still wet. When he brought it to the police chief the next morning, the man looked like he'd swallowed a stone. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Harlow replied. The chief exhaled. "You should stay out of this, Daniel. The sculptor doesn't make mistakes. If he left this for you to find, it's because he wants you in the game." Harlow smiled grimly. "Then it's time. I learned the rules." Chapter 2. The First Message. 3 nights after finding the canvas, Daniel Harlow arrived at City Hall before dawn. The building was silent, the marble floors echoing under his footsteps. He climbed the stairs to his office, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, but as soon as he reached his door, he stopped. Something was wedged between the frame and the handle, a white envelope. No stamp, no name, just a single hand-drawn spiral in red ink. He slid it into his coat pocket before unlocking the door. Inside, the room smelled faintly of turpentine. The curtains were closed, though he always left them open. On his desk sat a small box, neatly wrapped in brown paper. No note, no markings. He stared at it for a full minute before reaching for a pair of scissors. The tape peeled easily. Inside was a miniature clay sculpture, a human figure, head tilted unnaturally, arms bent, just like the first victim. The base of the sculpture was engraved with a date, Friday, 11:46 p.m. That was tomorrow. Harlow's throat tightened. Was it a threat? A deadline? A schedule? He pulled out the envelope, tore it open. One sentence typed in bold, "You're not chasing me, Mayor. You're following the path I built for you." He called the police chief immediately, but the man's voice was tight with irritation. "You shouldn't be handling evidence, Daniel. You're contaminating the case." Harlow's reply was cold. The case was already contaminated by the fact that this is the second time in a week I've found something before your men did. Silence. Then the chief muttered, "If you keep this up, he'll stop playing." Harlow almost laughed. "Good, then I win." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. That night he met his small team in the boxing gym again. The retired investigator, Lewis, studied the sculpture under a desk lamp. "This isn't a threat," Lewis said finally. "It's choreography. He's telling you where to be tomorrow." "Why me?" Harlow asked. Lewis looked up. "Maybe you're the only one who can appreciate his work." The team split into pairs, assigned to watch possible target locations around the city: abandoned theaters, rooftops, alleys with spiral graffiti. Harlow chose to stake out the riverfront, a place the sculptor hadn't struck yet, but which appeared in old crime scene photos from cases no one had connected. The wind was sharp that night, the water black. Every shadow felt alive. At exactly 11:46 p.m., he saw movement. A figure emerged from under the bridge, carrying something long and wrapped in cloth. Harlow's pulse spiked. He stepped out from behind a pillar, closing the distance. The man turned. Not the sculptor, a homeless veteran Harlow knew by name. "Evening, Mayor," the man mumbled. But before Harlow could speak, he noticed something on the ground where the man had been standing. A Polaroid photo. Fresh. The image was of Harlow himself, standing in that exact spot. He scanned the area, but the shadows offered nothing back. The bridge groaned under the wind. Somewhere above, footsteps echoed briefly, then faded. He grabbed the photo and returned to his car, heart pounding. The back of the Polaroid had a note written in neat handwriting. "You're on time. That's good." The next morning, the city woke to headlines about a third body. Found in a luxury apartment uptown, posed in a lounge chair, cigarette in hand, as if frozen mid-conversation. And there, on the wall behind him, another spiral. Harlow studied the crime scene photos. The timestamp from the building's security camera showed the killer entering at 11:47 p.m. One minute after Harlow had been at the bridge, it wasn't just a message, it was proof. The sculptor knew exactly where Harlow would be and had used it to kill elsewhere. The mayor felt the walls closing in. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a performance, and he was no longer sure if he was the hunter or the lead actor. Chapter 3. The Mayor on Trial. By Monday morning, the city was buzzing, but not about the killer, about the mayor. Headlines screamed, "Harlow at third murder scene before police, and is the mayor obsessing over a lost cause?" On talk radio, callers debated whether he was helping or hurting the investigation. Some accused him of interfering, others hinted that he might be seeking attention, and a few whispered something worse, that he knew more than he was saying. Harlow's communications director stormed into his office with a stack of newspapers. "This has to stop," she snapped. "Every time you show up at a crime scene, the cameras are there before the police. People are starting to wonder how you know where to be." Harlow stared at the headlines. He knew exactly who was behind this. The sculptor didn't just kill, he composed. And now, the public outrage was part of his art. The next blow came in the form of a letter slid under the door of the city council chamber during a budget meeting. Thick paper, expensive ink. Inside, a single typed paragraph. "Every city needs a leader. Every leader needs a legacy. I'm giving you yours, Daniel." Attached was a USB drive. No return address, no fingerprints. In his locked office, Harlow inserted the drive into his laptop. A video began to play, grainy black and white footage from a hidden camera. It showed Harlow himself, walking into an alley, kneeling beside a lifeless body, adjusting the victim's arm, looking straight into the camera. Harlow's breath caught. The footage wasn't real. It couldn't be, but it looked real enough to ruin him. He called Lewis and Reyes to his office. Reyes played the video twice, silent, his face pale. "It's a deep fake," Lewis said finally, "but the public won't care. Once this gets out, they'll believe you're part of it." "Part of it?" Harlow asked. Lewis didn't answer. That night, Harlow went home through the back streets to avoid the press. His wife was waiting, arms crossed, her face tight. "I got a call today," she said. "Someone told me you're not safe to be around, that you're dangerous." Harlow felt his stomach sink. Who? They didn't say, but he already knew. The next morning, protesters gathered outside City Hall. Some held signs demanding the mayor's resignation. Others had spirals painted on their faces. The image chilled him, the killer's mark, now on the faces of his own citizens. Cameras caught every step he took into the building. A chant began to rise. "Step down, step down." The sculptor was winning without lifting a finger. At a closed-door meeting, the police chief leaned forward, voice low. "You're too deep in this, Daniel. Whether you like it or not, you're now part of the story. And if the killer decides to stage you as his next scene, we might not be able to save you." Harlow's reply was ice cold. "Then I'll save myself." That night, a package arrived at his home. No return address. Inside, another clay figure. This one looked exactly like him. Suit, tie, down to the crease in his brow, but its head was missing. At the bottom of the box, a note. Friday, 11:46 p.m. Harlow placed the figure on his desk, stared at it until the office lights dimmed. He wasn't sure if the sculptor was threatening him nor inviting him. Either way, he knew one thing. He wasn't stepping down, he was stepping closer. Chapter 4. The Trap. Daniel Harlow sat in the boxing gym's back room, the clay figure of himself in front of him like a silent dare. Lewis leaned over the table, tracing the missing head with his finger. "This isn't just a threat," he said. "It's a timestamp, a place." Harlow didn't look up. "Friday, 11:46 p.m. He's telling me where to be." Reyes frowned. "Or he's telling you where he will be." Harlow smiled grimly. "Exactly." They pulled every past crime scene photo, searching for subtle clues. Shadows in the background, recurring landmarks, small objects in the corners that didn't belong. And then, in the image from the second murder, Harlow saw it. A mural on a brick wall, half hidden, faded, the same spiral, but larger, older. He knew that wall. It was behind the abandoned textile factory on the east side of the river. The factory had been condemned for years, its windows smashed, its walls tagged with decades of graffiti. It was the kind of place no one noticed anymore, perfect for a killer who wanted to control the stage. Harlow's plan was simple. Be there first. No police, no media, no interference, just him and the sculptor. On Friday, Harlow arrived hours early. He wore dark clothes, carried no phone, and brought only a flashlight and his father's old revolver. The factory smelled of rust and mildew, the air heavy with dust. His footsteps echoed across the cracked concrete floor. In the distance, water dripped steadily, each sound like a ticking clock. He found a vantage point on an upper catwalk overlooking the main floor. The spiral mural was directly below, faint under layers of graffiti. He settled in, the revolver resting across his lap, and waited. Every sound became sharper, the creak of old metal, the scurry of rats, the low moan of the wind through broken windows. At 11:40 p.m., he heard it. Footsteps, slow, measured, coming from the far end of the factory. A beam of light swept across the floor. A figure entered, tall, hooded, moving, with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the space. Harlow's pulse quickened. This was it. Months of chasing shadows, and now the shadow was here. The sculptor walked to the center of the floor, directly beneath the spiral. He placed a bundle on the ground, unwrapped it. A body, female, young, unconscious or dead. Harlow couldn't tell. The killer began to arrange her arms, tilting her head in that same unnatural way. It was deliberate, precise, like a painter working on his final stroke. Harlow raised the revolver, aimed, and stepped forward. "It's over," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space. The sculptor didn't look up. "No," he replied, calm, almost amused. "It's just beginning." Then the lights in the factory blazed on all at once. Harlow froze. From every balcony, every corner, cameras blinked red. He wasn't alone. The entire scene was being recorded. The killer finally looked at him, pulled back the hood. It wasn't a stranger, it was the police chief. "Smile for the city, Mr. Mayor," he said. Harlow's mind reeled, but before he could react, the chief tossed something toward him, the missing head of the clay figure. And then, in the corner of his vision, Harlow saw movement. Reyes, holding a camera. The chief's voice echoed, "Every story needs a villain. Tonight, you become mine." And then, from the floor below, the woman groaned. Alive. The cameras zoomed in. Harlow realized too late. The trap had never been for the killer. It had been for him. Chapter 5. The Fall. The headlines the next morning were merciless. Mayor caught at scene of possible murder. Is Daniel Harlow the real sculptor? TV anchors replayed the factory footage on a loop. Harlow stepping out of the shadows with a gun, standing over an unconscious woman, cameras capturing every second. No context, no explanation, just the image of a mayor turned predator. By noon, the city council had called an emergency session. His communications director begged him not to attend. "You'll be eaten alive in there," she warned, but Harlow went anyway. The chamber was packed with reporters, their flashes like lightning. Council members fired questions like bullets. Why were you there? Why was there no police backup? Why did you have a weapon? Harlow's answers sounded weak, even to himself. Reyes never showed. Lewis didn't answer his calls. And the police chief, the man Harlow had seen under the hood, denied everything, claiming he'd been home all night with his wife. "There's no evidence placing me there," the chief said with a smug smile, "but there's plenty placing you." That evening, the protests outside City Hall grew violent. Glass shattered, flares lit the night. Among the crowd, Harlow saw spirals painted on walls, sidewalks, even faces. They weren't just symbols anymore. They had become a movement. And movements, he knew, were harder to kill than men. Back in his office, he found another package on his desk. Inside, a clay figure of himself. But this one had a new detail. Its hands were bound behind its back. On the base, a fresh date. Friday, 11:46 p.m. Another countdown, another performance. He locked the office door and sat in the dark. His mind replayed the moment in the factory. The lights, the cameras, the chief's voice, Reyes with the lens. Could they both be part of it, or was Reyes just another pawn? He remembered Lewis's words. "This isn't a threat, it's choreography." Maybe the entire city was the stage. The next day, 2 detectives arrived at his home. They didn't arrest him, not yet. But they seized his laptop, phone, and personal files. "Ongoing investigation," they said. The implication was clear. He was the prime suspect now. No badge could protect him. No office could shield him. Harlow drove to the river that night, the place where he had first realized the killer was watching him. The water was black, reflecting nothing. A single envelope floated toward the shore. He waded in, grabbed it, and tore it open. Inside was a Polaroid of him sleeping in his own bed. The timestamp read, "Last night, 3:12 a.m. Someone had been in his home. Again." On the back of the photo, in small, neat handwriting, "Leaders fall, artists endure." Harlow knew then that the sculptor wasn't just a killer. He was an architect of narratives. His victims weren't random people. They were characters in his story. And now, Daniel Harlow had been written into the script as the villain. The city no longer belonged to him. His office was a cage, his allies were shadows, and somewhere the sculptor was already working on the next scene. Harlow stared at the clay figure on his desk, its bound hands, its mocking detail. And for the first time, he wondered if surviving this meant catching the sculptor or becoming him. Chapter 6. Crossing the Line. Daniel Harlow used to believe in rules, in laws, in the invisible lines that held a city together. But the sculptor had taught him something different. Lines weren't there to protect people. They were there to keep them predictable. And predictable men could be destroyed. That night, in the quiet of his locked office, Harlow decided to stop being predictable. He started with the clay figure, turned it in his hands, studied every angle, the bound wrists, the tilt of the head. There was meaning here, but not the kind the police would understand. He smashed it against the desk, breaking it open. Inside, he found something he didn't expect, a SIM card wrapped in plastic. He inserted it into a burner phone he kept hidden in his desk. A single contact appeared. Private channel, 11:46 p.m. No messages, no calls, just the number. His instincts told him it was bait, but the other part of him, the part the sculptor had been nurturing, told him it was an invitation. Instead of calling, Harlow began his own hunt. He pulled the files the detectives hadn't taken, cross-referencing dates, times, and victim locations. A pattern emerged. Every scene aligned with historical sites in the city, old theaters, factories, mansions, all connected to a forgotten artist collective from the 1970s. Their motto, "Life is the canvas." That collective had disbanded after a series of unsolved murders in 1979. Murders staged exactly like the sculptors. Harlow realized the killer wasn't creating something new. He was reviving an old design. And if the collective had a hidden location back then, maybe it still existed. He visited the city archives after hours, bribing the night clerk with a promise of political favors. The blueprints of an abandoned gallery on the east side revealed a basement level not listed in any current maps. A forgotten place, a stage beneath the city. Harlow didn't tell Lewis, didn't call Reyes. He went alone, armed only with the revolver and a flashlight. The gallery was a hollow corpse of a building, its walls peeling, its windows boarded. He found the trapdoor beneath a rotting carpet. The stairs led into darkness thick as oil. The basement was lined with mannequins, dozens of them. Some painted, some dressed, some broken into pieces. In the center stood a table covered in photographs, every crime scene from the sculptor's spree, and among them a few photos of Harlow from years before he was mayor. On the table, a note, "You're almost ready." Harlow's hand tightened around the revolver. The air shifted. Footsteps echoed behind him. A voice, calm, close, and amused. "You see now, don't you? We're not enemies. We're the same artist, painting with different brushes." Harlow turned, but the figure melted back into the shadows. His pulse was steady. For the first time, he didn't feel like prey. He felt aligned, and he whispered into the dark, "I'll learn your art." Because deep down, he knew the only way to kill the sculptor was to become him first. Chapter 7. Playing the sculptor. The first thing Harlow did was choose the stage. The sculptor always picked locations with history, with dust in the walls and echoes in the air. So Harlow found his own, an abandoned hotel downtown, long forgotten by the city. He left the doors unlocked, the lights off, and a single object in the center of the lobby. A clay figure shaped like a man in a hoodie, an invitation. Next, he created the scene. He posed the figure in the same way the first victim had been found, head tilted, arms bent at unnatural angles. Around it, he painted spirals on the cracked marble floor. He made sure each one could be seen from above. If the sculptor was watching from a hidden vantage point, he'd know this was for him. But Harlow didn't tell the police, didn't tell his dwindling circle of allies. This was his hunt now. The fewer people who knew, the less chance the sculptor could twist the narrative against him. He installed hidden cameras in the chandeliers, set to stream directly to a laptop in his car across the street. For 2 nights, nothing happened. The hotel stayed silent, the clay figure collecting dust. But on the 3rd night, just after midnight, one of the cameras caught movement. A figure stepped into the lobby, hooded, deliberate, carrying something long and wrapped in cloth. Harlow's pulse quickened. He grabbed the revolver and entered through the back. The figure circled the clay man slowly, then crouched. With careful hands, he began adjusting the sculpture's arms, as if correcting Harlow's work. It was intimate, almost gentle. Harlow stepped closer, the revolver raised. "Do you like my scene?" he asked, his voice echoing in the hollow space. The sculptor didn't turn. "Improvement," he said, "but it's missing one thing." He reached into the cloth bundle and pulled out a Polaroid camera. Without looking, he aimed it at Harlow and clicked. The flash burned white in the dark. Now it's perfect, he murmured. Harlow advanced. You're done. This ends tonight. The sculptor chuckled. You think you're the hunter now? No. You've been performing for me since the first body. Every choice you've made, every place you've gone, it's all been part of the gallery. And you've played your role beautifully. Harlow fired a shot into the floor, the sound shattering the stillness. Step away from the figure, the sculptor did, but only to reveal what was behind it. Another clay model. This one was Harlow. Exact suit, exact stance. The base read, Friday, 11:46 p.m. Harlow felt his breath catch. That was tomorrow. You're trying to scare me, Harlow said. No, the sculptor replied. I'm finishing you. You can kill me here, and the story will still belong to me, or you can keep playing. And maybe, just maybe, earn the ending you want. The words wrapped around him like chains. Harlow didn't pull the trigger. When he left the hotel, the sculptor was still inside, rearranging the clay figure as if it were a masterpiece in progress. Harlow didn't stop him. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure if capturing the sculptor would mean winning or losing the only purpose he had left. Chapter 8. The Eve. The city felt quieter that Thursday night, as if holding its breath. Every shadow looked heavier, every alley deeper. Daniel Harlow drove through the streets with the revolver in his lap, the clay figure from the hotel riding in the passenger seat. Its dead eyes seemed to follow him. Tomorrow, 11:46 p.m. The countdown wasn't just in his mind anymore. It was in his bones. Back at his apartment, Harlow turned off every light and locked the door. He spread maps across the dining table, marking every location connected to the sculptor. The gallery basement, the textile factory, the hotel. He drew lines between them, over and over, until the map looked like a web. And at the center, a single empty square. A place that hadn't been touched yet, the old botanical garden. The garden had been closed for years after a fire destroyed half the greenhouse, but Harlow remembered walking there as a boy, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Now it would make the perfect stage, plants, spirals in nature, and isolation. If the sculptor was following his own symbolism, it was the only place left for the final act. He visited the garden that afternoon. The gates were chained, but the lock was rusted. Inside, the air was damp, the broken glass ceiling letting in thin slivers of grey light. Dead vines hung like ropes. In the center of the main room was a cracked stone fountain, dry and cold. Harlow stood there for a long time, imagining how the sculptor would use the space, and how he would be waiting. That night, Harlow slept in 2-hour bursts. Each time he woke, he thought he heard footsteps in the hall outside his apartment. Once, he found an envelope slid under the door. Inside was a Polaroid of the Botanical Gardens fountain. In the corner, written in neat black ink, 11:46 p.m., wear something dark. He didn't show the photo to anyone. He didn't call Lewis. He didn't trust Reyes. The sculptor had turned allies into liabilities, and Harlow had no room for interference. This was his stage now, his hunt, his story. Whether it ended in victory or death didn't matter, as long as it ended with him. He spent Friday morning cleaning the revolver, packing only what he needed. Extra rounds, a flashlight, the burner phone with the SIM card, and the clay figure. At noon, he burned every file he had on the sculptor. If he failed, he didn't want anyone else picking up where he left off. If he won, there would be no need for records. Either way, the truth would vanish with him. By evening, rain had begun to fall, turning the streets into mirrors. Harlow sat in his car outside the locked garden gates. Engine off, headlights dark. Every minute felt like an hour. He thought about the first body, about the spiral, about the moment he decided to break the rules. And he wondered if, somewhere along the way, the hunt had stopped being about justice and started being about proving he could win. At 11:30 p.m. he slipped inside the garden. The fountain loomed ahead, lit faintly by moonlight through the shattered glass ceiling. He positioned himself in the shadows, revolver steady, breath slow. And then, at exactly 11:46 p.m., footsteps echoed against the stone. Slow, deliberate. A figure emerged from the far end of the greenhouse, hooded, carrying something in both hands. Harlow aimed. "It ends tonight!" The figure stopped, slowly lowered the hood. It wasn't the sculptor, it was Reyes. In his hands, another clay figure, this one of Daniel Harlow, kneeling. Behind him, from the darkness, came the sculptor's voice. "You're right, Daniel. It ends tonight, but not the way you think." Chapter 9. The script. Rain dripped through the broken glass ceiling, pattering onto the cracked stone fountain. Reyes stood frozen in the moonlight, holding the clay figure of Harlow on his knees. His face was pale, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I tried to keep you out of this." Harlow's grip on the revolver tightened. "Step away from him," he ordered, his voice trembling. From the shadows, the sculptor emerged, hood still up, movements slow, deliberate. "Do you know why I chose you, Daniel?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. "Because you were already halfway here. You just didn't know it yet." Harlow aimed at his chest. "You've been killing people to prove some twisted point." The sculptor chuckled. "No, I've been teaching." He gestured toward Reyes. "Your friend here? He's been my understudy for months. Feeding me your moves, making sure you were always exactly where you needed to be. Every scene you found because I let you." Harlow's stomach twisted. He looked at Reyes. "Tell me he's lying." Reyes swallowed hard. "Daniel, it's bigger than him. Bigger than me." The sculptor stepped closer, rain slicking his hood. "This isn't about bodies. It's about narrative, about legacy. Do you know why people will remember you, Daniel?" Harlow spat the words. "Because I'll be the one who kills you." The sculptor smiled faintly. "No, because you'll be the one who takes my place." Reyes placed the clay figure on the edge of the fountain. The sculptor circled Harlow slowly, speaking like a teacher reciting a lesson. "Every city needs a face for its fear, someone to define the darkness. You've been mayor, Daniel. You know how power works. Fear is the same currency, just spent in a different market." Harlow's mind raced. Every clue, every scene, every Friday night, all of it had led him here, not to stop the sculptor, but to inherit him. The idea made his skin crawl, but somewhere deep, it resonated. Wasn't that what he had been doing all along? Chasing him, mirroring him, learning him? "You think I want this?" Harlow asked, voice low. The sculptor tilted his head. "I think you already do." Why else would you break your own laws, risk your own reputation, walk into the dark again and again? You've already been sculpting, you just need to admit it. The air between them felt heavy, electric. Reyes stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. Harlow's revolver was still aimed, but his finger had gone slack on the trigger. The sculptor leaned in, whispering, "I can vanish tonight. And the city will still need someone to play the part. Do it for them, Daniel. Wear the mask. Finish the gallery." For a moment, Harlow imagined it, setting the scenes, controlling the story, bending fear to his will. No more being on the defensive, no more running. He could decide who lived, who died, who mattered. The thought burned through him, both intoxicating and sickening. But then he saw the clay figure again, kneeling, bound, a warning or a prophecy. Harlow raised the revolver to the sculptor's forehead. The man didn't flinch. "Do it," the sculptor said, smiling. "And you'll prove me right." For the first time in months, Harlow's mind was blank. No strategy, no politics, just a trigger under his finger and a decision that would decide whether he remained Daniel Harlow, mayor, or became the next name the city feared to whisper. Chapter 10. The bloom of power rain slid down the barrel of the revolver as Daniel Harlow kept it pressed to the sculptor's forehead. The man's eyes were calm, steady, almost pleading, not for mercy, but for completion. "End it," the sculptor whispered. "Become it." The world seemed to narrow into two possibilities: pull the trigger and silence the voice forever, or walk away and let the cycle devour someone else. But both roads felt like traps. Harlow's finger tightened, then stopped. He lowered the gun, slowly. The sculptor's lips curled into a knowing smile. "You understand now," he said. "It's not about killing, it's about control." Harlow stepped back, revolver still in hand. "No," he said. "It's about ending the game." Without warning, he turned the gun toward the clay figure of himself and fired. The shot shattered it into dust. "I won't be your prophecy." The sculptor's expression darkened. For the first time, he looked unsure. "Then you'll be nothing." "Nothing is better than being you," Harlow replied. He raised the revolver again, but when he pulled the trigger this time, the sculptor was already gone, melting into the shadows. Footsteps echoed away through the greenhouse, fading into the rain. Harlow didn't chase. He knew the man could disappear for years, decades, and still return when the city was ready for its next act. Reyes emerged from the darkness, face unreadable. "You didn't kill him. I killed what he wanted me to be," Harlow said. They walked out together, the sound of the rain masking the silence between them. Neither spoke about the figure, the fountain, or the man who had just vanished. But deep in the city's abandoned corners, a new spiral was already being painted, and Daniel Harlow knew this wasn't the end. It was only the pause before the next performance. The official report stated that the mayor had been pursuing a person of interest connected to the sculptor murders. No arrests were made, no suspect was named. The public was told the case was ongoing, though in truth, the file was quietly closed months later. Daniel Harlow returned to his duties at City Hall. He smiled at cameras, signed legislation, and cut ribbons at new schools. But behind the polished speeches, something in his eyes had changed. Sharper, colder, as if every conversation was part of an unseen calculation. The sculptor was never caught. New murders never came. But every so often on quiet Friday nights, Harlow would drive alone through the city's dark streets, passing the places where the bodies had once been found. Sometimes a fresh spiral would appear on a wall. Sometimes a clay figure would be left in the shadows, and sometimes he would stop, pick it up, and take it home. Because even if he had refused to wear the mask, the city had already begun to see him in it.